Welcome to TAG, the podcast led by the Ypsilanti District Library's Teen Advisory Group. Here we talk about subjects such as mental health, safe spaces, what's your aesthetic, and the subscription packs that the Ypsilanti District Library hands out to the community teens and youth. For today's episode, we will be talking about safe spaces with a guest from Ozone. Sit back, relax, grab a snack, and enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to our podcast this month. This is the Teen Library podcast at the Ypsi Library, and today we're going to be talking about safe spaces. So first, we're just kind of going to talk about our pack and talk about the contents and the book that was in it, and then we're going to share some personal stories about creating a safe space and how it was resolved. We have a special guest today from Ozone House. Who would like to remain anonymous, so we're going to refer to them as Alex, just for clarity. We're going to go through just some local resources that you can access if you feel unsafe or you need help in any capacity, and just kind of talk about safe spaces as a whole. So my name is Sophie, and we're just kind of going to go around and introduce ourselves first. So I pick Amelia to introduce herself next.
Hi, I'm Amelia. I've been working at the library since February of this year, and I'll go ahead and pass it on to Lexi.
Okay, I'm Lexi. I am just kind of sitting in for this podcast, but I will make comments here or there. And I have popcorn cake.
I've been working at the library for a few years now. Popcorn to Daniel.
I'm Daniel. Been working at the library for a few months.
So popcorn, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren, and I just started working at the library about a month ago.
All right, so I am going to turn it over to Amelia, who is going to talk about the contents of the pack we distributed this month.
Yeah, so for October's pack, we've called it Safe Spaces, and we have a number of contents in this pack. First, we have the book. The book is called The Field Guide to the North American Beiger. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but along those lines, and it's by Ben Phillip. And this book is basically about a Black French-Canadian teen who moves to Austin, Texas, starting out in a new high school and starts passing time in his new home, making friends, and sort of like categorizing people based on their social groups. So as he's passing time in his new high school, he's kind of like starting to like figure out who these people are and kind of like what they do, but he's not so much like interacting with them. But the more he stays at this new high school and his new home, he starts hanging out with them more, and he's kind of trying to see where he fits in and how he wants to live his life in his new home compared to back at his old home. Other contents, this pack include a bath bomb, a Japanese bath salt, reusable heating pack, Mentos, a string fairy lights, squishy mesh stress balls, a Rubik's Cube, and motivational stickers, as well as safe space buttons. And that's all we have for this month's pack.
I would just like to note that I squished my squishy ball so much that it broke like 2 days within getting it.
Mine broke within like 5 hours, so.
I just ended up like squishing off like the orbs because they're made of water and you could like crush them and stuff. And then I squeezed it so hard that like all the guts squeezed out and it got all over my floor and it was very messy.
Oh wait, what about the lights in the pack? What about those?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you can actually see it right here.
Like they died in like 4 days of having them, so that's really, really sucks.
My sister, she put it up in her room, and she turns it on every now and then at night.
I have a note, not so much of the lights, but of the Mentos. I basically ate all of them in 2 days. I'm pretty proud of it though, so I'll own up to it.
I also
You're supposed to save those?
a short period of time. Can you see? I put my lights up. I have this thing with like my name on it, and I like put them on my wall. I like them. I'm surprised. We got like a bunch of them for really cheap, but they're pretty high quality. So good on us for being efficient with our funding.
I feel like lights always add like a nice ambiance to the space, so I'm a big fan.
You can't see, but I'm nodding my head in agreement. Well, if anyone doesn't have any more comments about the packs, do you want to kind of start to dive into the theme surrounding the packs this month? I'll take that as a yes. So the theme that we picked this month was safe spaces, and this theme is really important to us because one of our values here at YDL is safety, like personal, mental, and emotional well-being is really important to us, and having a place where you can de-stress, or a place or a person to go to when you need help because you feel unsafe is really key. And we thought that it was super important to kind of talk about this and to give people resources if they don't necessarily already have them. So just to kind of start out, for some context, if you ever feel unsafe, or if you've had a situation where you were scared or you felt like you were in danger of some kind, you are not alone, okay? Like, all of us have kind of been in situations where we don't necessarily feel safe and we needed help. And like, it's good to ask for help. Please always ask for help whenever you feel unsafe. Me personally, I used to work somewhere that was pretty close to my house, so I would walk there to work. But a lot of times when I was walking to work, there would be people that would like follow me and like make pretty lewd comments at me, and I didn't necessarily feel safe. And sometimes at this job that I used to have, people would approach me and kind of like say inappropriate things to me. And when things like this would happen, I would always make sure to go to an adult or to my boss and to let them know about the situation so that they could kind of watch my back while I was working, or to kind of like protect me to make sure it wouldn't happen again. There's also been some situations at school where people have said kind of like very crude comments about my appearance, or made like sexually explicit jokes about me that made me feel really unsafe. And whenever things like that happen, I always go to a counselor to like discuss it, which is really important. And it's hard sometimes to ask for help when you feel like you're in an unsafe situation. And I don't know, a lot of times you're like, well, is this bad enough, like, for me to ask for help? Should I even ask for help? And that's something that we kind of wanted to maybe talk about a little bit later too, like how to know when you should ask for help and when you shouldn't. Spoiler alert, if you're kind of questioning whether or not you should probably just do it anyway, just to be on the safe side. I mean, not everyone experiences like harassment or like dangerous situations, and sometimes you just need a safe space to de-stress. So I think we're going to have some other people maybe talk about their experiences with dealing with stress more specifically, or feeling overwhelmed. So I'm going to turn it over to Amelia.
Yeah, so personally for me, I don't think I've really had an experience where I felt super unsafe, not that I can think of right off the bat. But there have been scenarios, well, not scenarios, but like times where I've been like super stressed and I've needed that safe space for myself. So personally for me, my safe space is more so my room. But since I can't always be in my room whenever like something bad happens, I more so have like a mental safe space for me, where I sort of like listen to music and kind of like take a step back from whatever is like making me like frustrated, and I take a step out, take a breath of like fresh air, or even like go on a walk if I'm able to. And I kind of like give myself that space to separate myself from the things that are making me frustrated. For example, like if I'm super overwhelmed at school and all the assignments going on, kind of take a step back from all of that, and just even away from technology too during that time, to just like take a breather and really calm myself down before getting into that. And I think it's really important doing that like once a day, even for like a few minutes or like an hour. It really helps because it really sets you away from everything that's like frustrating you and calms you down a bit. Even if it's just for a few minutes, it really helps, especially for me. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Caden.
When we talk about safe spaces, I have two. My first one is on an app called Discord, which is basically a chatting app. And the group I'm in consists of roughly 26 people, all anonymous, and we're all people from around the world. My second safe space is the room I do all my work in, so all my studying, all YEL stuff, etc. This is the place where I am for most of the day to just relieve all the stress I feel during school, especially during all these standardized testings I've had during this month. With right now, I have had 5, and it's been interesting in here because I like being alone. It's very calming, and in general, I just get a lot more done when I'm not around people, especially at school. Something about it allows me to work more efficiently, and that's about it. Popcorn to Daniel.
Very recently, especially, I've been feeling really overwhelmed about like school and life. And like as a senior, I'm about to go through one of the biggest transitions a person could go through, going from high school to being an adult. And especially now when it's a pandemic, no one really knows where the world is going to be in the next, 2 months, let alone 2 years. So it's just been a very stressful and overwhelming experience. But I feel like for me, my biggest safe space isn't really like a place, it's more of an environment because like I'm an athlete. So anywhere that I can go and train and practice and compete, that's my safe space because that's where I feel the most comfortable. That's where I feel the most like focused, and I can just be around my teammates and we can just enjoy each other's company and focus on, our workout or our competition or our meet or whatever we're doing in that moment. And we can just be together and have that bond and just live in the moment and focus on what we're doing like in that area, in that environment. So popcorn to Lexi.
The safe mental space that Amelia was talking about was really interesting to me. I never thought about that. Just like making the intention of creating a safe space like in your head. I kind of focused on more like tangible ways of creating a safe environment around me. And just like creating a sense of calmness in my environment. I usually will always just go to my room if I'm ever feeling overwhelmed or stressed with work or school. And I'm a big fan of like having aromatherapy, like candles or oil diffuser and stuff like that. And also just like bringing new energy. Like I'll even just like go to the dollar store or like the thrift store and just get like something cute just to bring new energy into the space. And it's just a way for me to make my space feel more conducive to productivity and safety and everything like that. So yeah, popcorn.
I know on the aromatherapy real quickly, I like collect decorative soaps that smell really good. And recently my dad stole my favorite one and I'm really mad about it because he didn't just take any one. He took my absolute favorite one. Like it smelled like sandalwood and it was very distressing. So yeah.
I think my safe space is most definitely my room, specifically when I was in the 7th grade, because they always say that in the 7th grade, it's like the hardest year in middle school, and it's true, because that year, I was going through a lot. Also, the global pandemic, I was like losing a lot of friends. I was just like having like the absolute worst days, and also during cheer, I was not like able to like cheer at any of the competitions at all, and like I was just like going through like a really rough time, like I hated the world, and like I literally lost almost all of my friends due to the fact that I was like angry for like no reason. My grades are slipping. I wasn't really caring for my schoolwork at that point. Like I just like didn't care. Like I didn't do some of my schoolwork at all. And because like based on what my grades were in 6th grade, because I had all A's and B's, and now in 7th grade it was like really, really rough and really, really hard. And I just definitely turned to my room because I'd usually just like do my homework and like be on my phone watching videos and stuff all the time. So definitely my safe space is my room.
For me, since my safe space is also my room, I think it's also really important to keep the space like decluttered and clean for the most part. I think that it can feel like really even more overwhelming when you're in a space that's when you go try to go to a safe space, and it's like really cluttered and stuff like that. So I just try to make sure I always keep it clean and organized as best as I can. Yeah.
I think in that same train of thought of like, if your safe space is your room, I feel like you should keep it like your safe space. Like you shouldn't bring any work or anything in that environment unless that is something you use to decompress, because that would just ruin the entire like purpose of you having that place specifically to make you feel comfortable.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies that show that your place of rest should not also be the same as your place of work. So I definitely think there's something to that. Um, Going back to what Daniel was saying earlier about kind of like having an activity be your safe space, like you're an athlete. I used to be a competitive swimmer pre-pandemic. I haven't been doing that because of high risk for COVID, so I haven't really been going anywhere. But I don't know, like I was in a pretty isolating and like abusive relationship like right before the shutdown. And it was hard for me because the person that I was dating, like he didn't like any of my friends and basically forced me to like not talk to them anymore. So I just kind of felt really alone, and it was hard for me to kind of like cuz normally when I'm stressed out I go to my friends to talk to them, but I sort of didn't have that. So I lost myself in like I don't know, exercise, like swimming, and a safe space that's really important to me is Goodreads. I just I love reading books, and I think having a place where people kind of share a similar interest with me, that's like a place where I go to like escape my troubles, sort of, is really nice. And I also just like it because I feel like in general a lot of social media platforms are not as like wholesome and but I really like Goodreads because I feel like the majority of the people who are on there are like pretty intelligent and like are interested in kind of the same things as you, and it's a nice environment to be in where people most of the time are like very nice, and like you can just talk about books and stuff and you don't have to worry about politics or COVID or anything. So I'm also a musician too, so music is kind of another activity that I go to when I'm feeling stressed to kind of like decompress. If no one else really has anything to say on this topic, then I think we can move on to introducing our guest. So today with us, we have a very special guest who is technically our first guest on this podcast. So like that's crazy. Um, but I just like to introduce, we're going to call them Alex. That's not their real name, but they would like to remain anonymous for this podcast because some of the things that we're discussing are a bit sensitive, which is totally understandable. But today we've kind of brought Alex here to discuss a little bit about Ozone House. So Alex, start by kind of discussing a little bit about what Ozone House is and what they do for people.
So Ozone House is meant to be a safe place for anyone, in my eyes, is in like a dangerous or unusual situation. They don't really, it's, maybe saying it like that is a bit wrong because they do help you out if you're just like stressed or something, but a lot of their programs are, they have a program on like drug addiction, anger management, but they also have like support groups that are not specifically like trauma or hardship based, like Pride Zone for LGBTQ plus folk. They have a drop-in center nearby the downtown library on 102 Hamilton Street. Yep, 102 North Hamilton Street. But they also have a general building on North Tier Drive, I think.
Curiosity, how did you come across Ozone House, and like what inspired you to kind of get involved with them?
I've known about the Ozone House since I was in middle school, but the thing that pushed me much more towards it was in seventh grade. That was when a lot of my mental health issues really started taking the forefront in my life, and I was having a really hard time dealing with everything. So my mom said, "Hey, there's this place called Ozone House. They have this thing called Pride Zone. You might benefit from being with people who are like you and who could relate to you, and you could relate to them. And they also have like other things in them in it as well." So yeah, that's kind of what brought me to going to Ozone House in the first place.
Honestly, that is so cool. And I wish that when I was in middle school that I kind of had a resource like that. Because around that time, I was kind of going through like, I don't know, some things kind of figuring out my identity a little bit. And I was really struggling with like depression and self-harm. So I feel like that would have been a good resource to have. I think it's important that people kind of know that it's out there, so that if you're struggling, you can have a place where you feel safe, you know.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about an experience you've had with Ozone House that kind of made you realize that the work that they were doing was important?
Uh, I'm actually going to go towards the most recent example that I can think of because that's what I have the most memory of. I've always known it to be a safe place since I first started going there through Pride Zone. I used to just be a Pride Zone attendee. But a little while back, I went through some pretty bad trauma, and I was really not in a good headspace. And I actually ended up having a panic attack in the library because I was triggered by something. And you know, I explained just about everything to them, and they're like, "Well, we're not necessarily equipped to handle this, but would you like us to take you to Ozone House?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, yes, please." And you know, I talked through everything once again with Ozone House, and we were able to get through like a very good plan with each other to both talk about it with my therapist, who I haven't talked to in a while, and figured out a plan as to what would happen if I were to have a panic attack again. And they actually like looked up at me and said, "Wow, you seem like really calm now. Like you definitely calmed down a lot from when you first came in here." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this thing was like actually helpful, both like emotionally, like in the short term and like in the long term as well."
Yeah, definitely. I think just knowing that there are people out there who care about you and like want to support you and help you is really a lot more impactful than some people might think.
I think something else that's really important is having people around you, or just people who you can talk to that understand what you're going through and understand you as a person, because then they can help you get through those, situations whenever they arise.
You know, it's funny because when we were kind of talking about this topic earlier and like planning about what we were going to talk about, I was kind of just thinking of safe spaces as like a place more specifically, but I think that it's kind of a lot of different mediums. Like it's a physical place, but it's also a headspace. It's also an environment. It's also like things that you're passionate about. And it's also kind of like the people that you surround yourself with. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
I not to derail too much, but I do want to add to this stuff about mental and like non-physical safe spaces, like safe spaces that aren't like a person or an environment. Uh, I deal with some uh pretty bad and pretty like persistent mental health issues, and one of the biggest things that has helped me along the way was making my like just setting aside like a portion of my brain to be like a place that I can go to where negativity doesn't really exist. Like it's like a thing that I like constructed within my headspace to be like, okay, I'm going in here. This is my chill place. Nothing else can go in here.
It's funny. My stepmom and I always joke about, because we're like pretty organized people, and we always joke about like scheduling in time to have like a mental breakdown or like to cry or something. And I don't know. It's just, I think it's important sometimes, especially when you're really busy. Like, I have a lot of extracurricular activities, and it's really important in order to maintain my sanity to like take time where I'm not like around other people or like, I don't know, social media or like my devices. I like to do yoga to decompress and just take some time where I'm just kind of listening to my brain and my thoughts. Like, how are you doing, Sophie? Like, what's going on? Are you good? And just, I don't know. I think checking in with yourself and seeing how you're doing is important, especially in assessing whether or not you need help. I think a lot of times it's hard for us to ask for help when we're struggling, especially with things that aren't always super visible, like mental health, like depression and anxiety. But it's really important to check in with yourself occasionally to kind of evaluate whether or not you need to, like, I don't know, just reach out to someone or talk to someone or take a break or take other steps.
Yeah, and like in those situations where you know, talk to yourself and you really take a inventory of how you are mentally, you also have to be cognizant and be honest with yourself. Like you can't say like, I'm gonna be fine or I'm gonna be all right, when in reality you won't be, and that's just gonna cause multiple other problems down the line. And that's something I personally struggle with because I don't want to seem like I'm a problem to myself or a problem to anyone else. So I just make it seem like I'm okay when I might not be. So you have to really take that time to be legitimate and be honest with yourself. And if something is a problem, you have to address it, because if you don't, it's not going to help you. It's just going to hurt you.
I think in our society, a lot of times we're told that like being vulnerable or admitting that you need help is a sign of weakness, which I don't necessarily think is true. I think that the opposite is true. I think that it really kind of speaks to your character and like your resilience and your strength when you kind of have like the courage to ask for help when you're struggling with something. So I just kind of want to ask the group, for you personally, when you're like checking in with yourself and seeing how you're doing, if you're like upset about something or you're dealing with a conflict or you feel like you're in an unsafe situation or even just struggling with like school, how do you evaluate and like know when to ask for help versus when you don't?
I think for me personally, that's something I really need to work on. Like it's my junior year and there's like a lot coming up for me, like preparing for my SAT, among like getting ready for like in school assessments and then like learning about colleges and stuff. So like that like really stresses me out and kind of like I try to avoid it, even though that's something I really shouldn't avoid, and it really stresses me out. So I kind of like sometimes I have like breakdowns over like I have so much to do, I don't have enough time to do it, and like I kind of like after those breakdowns I don't really think about it that much after, which is like a really like something I shouldn't do, and that's kind of something I'm working on. So like personally for me, that's something like I want to emphasize, that if you aren't doing it then it's okay, but it's something you should kind of like work on, kind of think about doing for yourself. Like now what I'm trying to do is like every like 15 minutes or like towards the end of the day, kind of like what Sophie was talking about, like doing yoga to kind of like take out all of that like inner turmoil inside of her. I've started doing that too, and it's really helped. And like during that time I kind of like reflect on what I've done that day and like what I can do better mentally, and I think that's like really helpful too. So that's kind of what I've done. And what's really hard for me is like admitting when I need help, and then a lot of the times what like if it's hard for you to admit to yourself that you need help, it's hard to admit to others that you need help. So I think really reflecting on like things you're struggling on and what like you can do better on really helps too, especially if you're trying to do better and asking for help and letting yourself know you need help. That helped too.
I think it can be like really easy to distract yourself with like watching TV or social media or whatever, and just like ignoring all the problems that you feel. Like you subconsciously like know like I'm stressed out, I like need to chill and whatever, but you just kind of push those thoughts away and like just distract yourself with like TV and whatever, or even not distract yourself, just be like I'm fine, like just ignore it. But I think it's really important to like be self-aware and like introspective and think about how you're doing. And I think like writing things down is really helpful, like so you can just like see it on paper of like how I'm feeling or what you did that day that you liked or what you did that day that you want to improve upon, and just reflect about your day or your week if you can't like find time to do it every day, like just throughout the week or whatever. Yeah, just taking time to like slow down and actually think about yourself instead of just like distracting yourself with devices, you know what I mean? So
I think kind of connecting to what Lexi is saying, for me personally, when I'm like upset or experiencing a crisis of some time, I feel like I need to be doing stuff. Like I need to be productive. I need to be doing all this work. I need to be like, I don't know, just doing like lots and lots of things and be like moving and be busy. But my dad has kind of taught me that like when there's a disturbance in the force, essentially, like a lot of times the best thing that you can do that's hard to do sometimes is to not do anything, is to just kind of like, you know, sit with yourself and your feelings and just kind of, you know, take stock of your situation and like figure out what your next steps are, or don't have any next steps and just kind of, you know, sit with it and reflect a little bit. I think also in consumerism culture, we have all these like cure-alls, like, oh, if you buy this, this will make you feel better, or like everything that we have is like, you know, so a solution to some type of problem that you may or may not have. But I think a lot of times to sort of, I don't know, heal from things or to feel better, we just need to like take a time out, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Sophie. I think that's like one of the hardest things for me. I kind of relate with to like always needing to do work, always needing to feel productive. It's kind of hard to step away from that because once I take a break, I feel like I'm not getting anything accomplished by that. And kind of like what you're saying with your dad helping you realize that it's okay to take a break sometimes. Like I've learned, like my dad kind of showed me that taking a step back from all of that work really like helps you put yourself in a better mindset. And if anything, I feel like it makes you more productive too, because like if you're constantly working every day, you're starting to wear yourself down. But like taking that break and like looking after yourself both mentally and like emotionally, it really helps put you like in a better step moving forward.
Yeah, it's really easy, especially when you have a lot. Like I'm president of the Honor Society at my school. I help run like a literacy mentoring program. I work here at the library, and I also do a lot of like extra volunteering type things. And I go to a very, very rigorous school, and it's like my senior year. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And I think a lot of times we don't necessarily like prioritize checking in with ourselves or like self-care over work, because you're like, oh, well, the work is more important, obviously. Like I'm getting grades for this, or I'm getting service hours, or I'm like helping other people, and that's more important than like taking time for myself. But I think that we just kind of need to like rethink and assign value to like, you know, having some quiet time or some space to really take care of yourself.
Regarding to what you said, Sophie, my biology teacher said this before. What was it? You shouldn't prioritize your work, school, whatever, over your health. Your health is something that should be maintained because it's not healthy to not maintain it. Like for me personally, especially when I'm under an extreme amount of stress, I start to sleep deprive myself, getting maybe 2-3 hours of sleep every day and using the rest of the time to study, do work, or other things I have to do. In reality, we always have a second chance if you look at everything. The SAT, for example, we can take it multiple times. It may not feel the best to take it multiple times, but that's always an opportunity.
I just like to reiterate that I think asking for help is really, really important. And a lot of times I think we just assume, I don't know what it's like at other people's schools, but at my school, all of the teachers are like very understanding of like extenuating circumstances, or if you're feeling stressed out. And if you reach out to them, like, I don't know, maybe like before things are due or even when they are, and you're like, can I have an extension? I'm dealing with a lot this week. Like last week, my ex-boyfriend is like basically stalking me on the internet, and I had to report it and like fill out a bunch of stupid forms and stuff, and it took forever and it was dumb. But it took up a lot of time that like I could have been working on work, and I was stressed out, and I was like, oh my God, there's no way I'm gonna finish all this work in time. So I reached out to some of my teachers and I just explained the situation and asked for some extra time, and they were all super understanding and gave me extra time. And I think a lot of times we assume that like, oh, like what I'm asking for isn't important enough, or like no one's gonna understand, or they're gonna say no. And literally, when you ask for help or an extension, the worst that can happen is that someone can say no to you. Like, it's not, no one's gonna think less of you for like for asking for help or anything. And so I think it's important to reach out to people around you and to utilize the resources you have in terms of like your teachers and your counselors or even your parents, and to ask for help when you feel overwhelmed, because people are a lot more understanding than you think they are.
I agree like so much with like everything everyone just said about like that entire spectrum of, like your health and your mental health and asking people for help. So like us as, teenagers and even adults in general, like everyone in the entire world and as a collective society, we all have to understand that like while it is important to, have your work and have your activities and all of these things, we should not value those things over our mental health, because at the end of the day, all of those things are going to fade away. There's going to be a point where we're either too old to do those things or they won't be an opportunity for us to do. But until we die, our brains are always going to be here, whether we whether we understand that or not. Our mental health and our brains will always be functioning until we're no longer alive. So that's something that should be prioritized the most over everything else. And then there's this boxer, his name is Floyd Mayweather, and he has this really like famous quote that he says, and he says, "Health is your wealth. Your health is your wealth, because if you're healthy, you will be able to be productive. You will be able to do everything that you need to do. You will be able to get everything done. So then, you can actually take time to relax and take time to do the other things you want to do aside from your activities. So that's why you should prioritize your mental health and your physical health as well."
Yeah, Daniel, I think going back to what you were saying earlier about like big transitions in your life, and what Amelia was saying too about kind of making a mental, like being mindful, like mindfulness. I'm also a high school senior, and I'm at a really big impasse in my life where a lot of things are going to be changing and new things are going to be happening. And I think, especially as just teenagers in general, even if you're not a senior, it's really easy to get overwhelmed by worrying about the future. Like, where am I going to go to school? Like, where am I going to end up? What's going to happen? Like, it's really easy to get kind of overwhelmed. And I think that it's really important to kind of stay in the moment and to have some foresight about the future. Like, think about it a little bit and make sure you're, doing all the things you need to do to like end up in a good place, like academically or whatever. But I think it's also important to kind of stay in the moment and to take things one day at a time and create a headspace where you're not just constantly stressed out about what's going to happen. Things will turn out how they're supposed to turn out, hopefully, if you just kind of, take it slow and check in with yourself and make sure you're doing all the things you need to do, like day by day. Our producer Jody was asking us kind of what skills specifically we've learned to utilize when it comes to creating a safe space or to like dealing with difficult situations. For me personally, it depends on what's going on. Like, for example, if I'm feeling really angry or frustrated, I'll like bust out the weights and like do a bunch of push-ups and like get it all out, or like go for a run or something. But if I'm feeling like really sad or lonely, I'll like go and try and find someone to give a hug, because that's like kind of comforting to me. Or if I'm feeling really overwhelmed by like the amount of work I have to do and like anxious, I'll kind of take some time to be mindful. Like, I'll take a bath or I'll do some yoga. Or if I'm like having a conflict with someone else, maybe I'll go to an older adult person that I trust to kind of like ask their advice about the situation. So I think it's really important to have kind of like a toolkit of tools or different activities or skills or like practices that you can kind of use for different types of situations necessarily, because I don't necessarily think that there's like one thing that just works every single time. I think you kind of gotta assess what makes you feel better in certain situations and what works best for you.
I mean, I think the main thing I was trying to go for was that I had a community. I have learned about trying to reach out to others, and I suppose that having the community was like a teaching moment in of itself. I was never specifically like taught any like calming techniques, but I think being around a place that is meant to be calming, a place that is meant to be a chill place to be in, like a safe space, did uh help me like kind of learn through experience, I suppose. Like this is what a calm place looks like. This is what people sound like when they're trying to help you. That sounds like obvious, but it isn't obvious to like trauma survivors, especially if their trauma is like long term kind of stuff, like abusive relationships, or if their trauma happened very early on in life. You sometimes do need like those kind of obvious reminders to yourself that hey, this is what a nice safe space looks like. You can come here and talk to people about it, and this is what people tend to do to calm down. Like I never went into there specifically to learn about calming techniques. I was all the times that I went in looking for help was specific situations that I was stressed about. But through that process, I learned, hey, I can write down my feelings, and I don't necessarily have to share it with anyone. Or hey, if I'm in a dangerous place, I can call someone I know, or go into like a public area and ask someone at a counter or something to be like, hey, there's someone out there, they're making me very uncomfortable. Can I hang out here for a little while? So a lot of the stuff I talked about kind of falls into a strange area where there's so much to talk about that you just kind of get overwhelmed, I suppose, especially if you have personal experience with it, like I do. I suppose I don't want to say like you're not alone or something like that because like everyone hears that, and uh, I don't know, like
I think it's a good point though. I mean, you're not alone. Like whether you realize it or not, there are people out there who are willing to help you and who like care about you, and all you need to do is ask, you know? Like yeah. So, I don't know. I know that that's kind of cliche, but I also think that it's true on a lot of levels.
I suppose it is. I mean, a lot of my trauma responses tend to fall within the oh, I am very independent. I do not need to rely on other people, so I feel like that it kind of falls flat on me for that specific reason, like my hyper independence and stuff. But like, I don't know. It's weird.
I feel similarly. Like I lived with my mom up until I was 14, and she struggled with a lot of mental health challenges. Like she's has like a personality disorder and is kind of doesn't always act like an adult all the time, and it was hard to feel like I could rely on the adults around me. And now that I live with my dad, and sometimes I still kind of struggle to be like, oh, adults are people that I can trust who can help me and like take care of me because of that. So it's definitely something that's a real thing. And
I suppose this kind of falls more in line with like self care as opposed to safe spaces, but like even if you don't want to take care of yourself for the sake of yourself, which is a horrible position to fall in, but it is unfortunately a thing that's true for many people, you should take care of yourself for the people around you because the way you react to things, the way you feel has an effect on other people. Like the people who care about you will notice that you're not doing well. And if you're not working towards making yourself feel better, that's gonna be pretty bad for the people around you. They might feel a sense of like helplessness as they just kind of watch you like kind of I don't want to say rot, but that's really the best descriptor I can find. So like even if you don't want to try to like do self care for yourself, you should do it for the people around you because chances are there is someone who cares about you and is hurt by seeing you hurt. And as soon as you start taking care of yourself, you can work on loving yourself as self care. But like, there's not really a selfish reason for self care either. Like, any reason for self care is a good reason. Like, if you want to practice self care just because you want to, because society just kind of sucks right now, then fine, sure, go ahead. If you want to take care of yourself because your boyfriend said that you should practice self care, yeah, sure, go ahead.
I think it's also like this might sound a little idealistic of me, but I think that as humans we're vessels and it's our job to kind of like make the world a better place and to like improve our communities around us. And we can't necessarily do that if we're like overtired or really stressed out or overwhelmed or if we're not in a good space mentally. So it's kind of like you have to take care of yourself in order to like I don't know to help other people, you know?
Yeah, like I don't want to sound like too philosophical or anything, but we all have a purpose of being alive and we all have a reason we're on this earth. And if you're not in the right mental state, you can't do what you need to do when you're here because like it's a true reality. One day we all will no longer be on this earth. And while we're here, we have to make the most out of this time that we're here. So yeah.
Um if for whatever reason you feel like you're unsafe or you need help or just a community to reach out to, um, or you need Ozone House does a lot of other stuff than just provide a community where you can talk to other people. They also provide free Wi-Fi, free sorry, they also provide free Wi-Fi, a hot meal if you need one, a place to stay if you don't have like a place to live that's safe. You can do your laundry there. They can help you with your schoolwork or find a job or with transportation of any kind. So if you are ever in need of any of these resources, you can text Ozone, OZONE, to 734-662-2222. That's Ozone, OZONE, to 734-662-2222. Or you can try and find someone at the library and they can direct you to that resource. If you receive the packs, we always have either an ozone pamphlet in the packs or a QR code that's on the flyer that will lead you to an ozone resource. In December, we have a healthy relationships workshop coming up and an Ask a Licensed Psychologist questions. So if you have questions about how to deal with relationships or anxiety or depression, I do encourage you to check out our website and to go and sign up for that. There'll be more information coming out in an email and in our pack next month, or you can email teens@ypsilibrary.org if you're interested in attending that workshop. You can also follow us on Instagram, and again, you can email teens@ypsilibrary.org if you're interested in getting a pack or visit our website. But tell your friends to listen. Our mission here at YDL is to distribute resources and information to teens in need. So the more people who know about our program, the more good we can do. So make sure you tell your friends to listen to our podcast. Also coming up, we want listener participant questions. Like if you want to be featured in our podcast, make sure to look out for an email where we're sending questions out to people for them to share their stories. So if you want to share your stories with us, be on the lookout for a Google form that we're going to figure out how to put on our website, and also an email asking people to share your stories, either in a recording or in like a written form. So yeah, that's all. Thanks for listening.
This has been an episode of TAG. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Ypsi Library Teens. Also, make sure you're on the lookout on our website, ypsilibrary.org/subscription packs. That's where there'll be content involving the packs themselves, new information about the podcast, and promotional videos where you may be able to see some behind the scenes stuff about the podcast and the creation of the packs themselves. Again, this has been Tag. I hope you enjoy. Have a good day.